Hello and welcome to the Wise Leader Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Faye Watson. Are you interested in strategies to help you lead yourself and others wisely? Do you want to get a glimpse of how our Heavenly Father has been working marvelously in a leader's life? Well, you're in the right place because our guest today, Dr. Kenneth Shaw, will be providing us with some practical words of wisdom to help us with Christian leadership. And we will also hear his amazing story of how God has been working in his life. Dr. Shaw, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today.
For Faith, it's a delight and a pleasure.
Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
I'd be happy to do that. I grew up in East Tennessee, not too far from where I work today, and got into education, was a high school teacher, taught math and physics, computer programming back in the day, and went on and got my master's degree in mathematics, my doctorate in math education, and worked at Florida State University for about 25 years as a professor and an administrator and a branch campus administrator as well, and went on to be a president of a Christian university in Texas, and now have the pleasure to serve as president here at Southern Adventist University in Collegedale, Tennessee.
Wow, you certainly have a wealth of experience, and I'm just looking forward to unpacking that to see how, the different ways in which God worked in your life. So the topic of our conversation today is Christian leadership. How did you become interested in this topic, and how has God been helping you in this area?
Yeah, Christian leadership is, I'm a Christian, and being a leader in a Christian environment is very different than someone that I imagine that's not a Christian. I think servant leadership, following Christ's example, is one that I espouse. I believe as an administrator, setting the vision for the institution is very important, but it's not my vision. It's got to be our vision, and it has to be God's vision, because the institutions in which I've served recently are both Christian institutions. And I believe God established these schools for a reason. And I'm humbled to be able to serve as the leader of the institution and to be able to work alongside other very capable, wonderful Christian individuals that believe in the mission of the institution. In our institutions that I've worked, basically it's about knowledge development, it's about increasing one's faith, and it's about service to mankind. And so those three elements are extremely important to me personally, as well as espousing that for the institutions that I've served.
Yeah, that's so important. Now, I want to go into your story a little bit. Psalm 75 verses 6 and 7 indicates that promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but God is the judge. He puts down one and sets up another. So could you share with us some pivotal moments of your journey to help us understand how God orchestrated your career?
Well, I grew up in a Christian environment and taught at a private academy up in Nashville. And, I felt the call to work on a graduate degree. And so I went to the University of Georgia. And as I was getting ready to complete my dissertation and look forward to the next iteration of my life, I thought I would go back into a Christian institution to continue to be in that environment. And I was called to go to Florida State University. That's not a Christian school. I mean, it's got wonderful people, and I was blessed to be able to work alongside many of them. But I talked to a lady that I had great admiration for, and I said, what do you think about me going into the public education sector? And she said, we need Christians in every sector of life. And that just rung true in my mind, that I could represent Jesus in a way that maybe other people may not have seen. So I think that was a pivotal point in my transition from grad school to Florida State University. There was a transition when I left Florida State University. It was very interesting. My wife and I just paid off our house, being there for 25 years. Our children were grown and married and moved out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Just out of the blue, I found out I was nominated to be the president at Southwestern Adventist University. And so, very interesting. There was a search firm that was looking for the president there and reached out to me. And I said, you know, I'm not interested. I'm doing very well in my career here at Florida State University. He says, well, why don't you just send me your resume in the event something else comes up? You might be interested in transitioning later. Well, he snagged me there. I didn't realize his tactic, but he got my credentials, shared that with the search committee. And to make a long story short, God called me to go to Southwestern Adventist University to serve for 7 years. And just delighted, you know, my experience there. And then my wife and I both felt called to come to Southern Adventist University as well, after serving 7 years at Southwestern. And so God has just moved in our lives in wonderful ways. And we're delighted to reflect back on God's abundant, bountiful grace and blessings that he's bestowed upon us.
Wow. I like how you made a point, the important point of the need for Christians to be everywhere. You know, you don't have to be serving in a Christian institution to be serving, and which helped you to make the transition from grad school to Florida State. And then when you were nominated as president, you were able to, you know, answer that call. That's interesting. I like that. Just for you to be nominated, I think that is very commendable. So let me ask you this. And I know that this next question might be a little bit awkward for you to answer. However, I believe that your answer will help us on our journey. So what are some factors that you think God may have used to promote you? I mean, you got a call, you were nominated. So what could we learn? What are some factors that God may have used to promote you? For example, what do people tend to appreciate about you, or have said or even noted about you?
Yeah, those are awkward questions there, Firm Faith. So I think, you know, with all Christian leaders, I think integrity, character, those are a couple of characteristics that I think are very important. I think being true to your word, I think having a passion for the institution in which you work, and trying to move forward with that mission and growing an institution, all of those things I think are really important. I think also, you know, as a Christian leader, reflecting Christ in your life, being fair, being courteous, being a good listener, all of those things are very important. So how well I do those, you would have to ask someone else, but I think those are characteristics that I think are really important for a Christian leader to have.
Wow. These are things you mentioned: integrity, character, passion, being true to your word, you know, being committed to growing the institution that you're at. Even when you said you were nominated and the person called you, you were like, oh, I'm fine where I am, you know, being fair and courteous. Wow, thanks for sharing those with us.
I think I would just mention, Firm Faith, and that one example that you just mentioned, I think it's also important to listen to God's voice. So, you know, I said I wasn't interested to begin with, but he didn't take no for an answer. He kept coming back. And so that really caused my wife and I to reflect and to think about where we were in life, and was there an opportunity for us to get back in a different part of the world. We weren't familiar with Texas, and we didn't know anyone there. And so it was like being a missionary in a way, in that we went to a new land and really got into that culture and really started to love on the people that we had opportunity to work with.
Mhm.
And, I miss those individuals greatly. I mean, we forged a partnership and a bond that
Mhm.
I think will last for eternity.
Wow. So you mentioned something, listening to God's voice. I know this is deep and it's going to be different for everyone, but what would you say to someone who is saying, wow, but how would I know that really it was God that was leading me in this situation?
Well, I think it takes a little bit of experience
Mm.
sometimes. One of my favorite Bible verses is Isaiah 40:31, and it says, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." And I
Mhm.
think waiting on the Lord, I have my daily devotions where, I do some reading, I do some reflecting, I do some listening, and I
Mm.
ask God to direct my paths throughout the day. And I think when we do that on a regular basis, I think we're more inclined to hear God's voice and to realize that we're here out of service for Him and not out of service for ourselves. And that's not something that I knew 30, 40 years ago. I mean, this is
Mhm.
something throughout life that I recognize and appreciate even more today than I did early on in my career.
Hmm. I still feel like I want to go a little bit deeper with this because, you can have your devotion, you can be there quietly waiting on the Lord and wait, 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 wait. Um, at what point, how do you know? Could you help us a little more in terms of, um, I don't know if you still want to draw on your example. Was there a pivotal point in this experience that helped you to say, yes, I think God is saying go?
Well, I think with marriage, a marriage is a partnership.
Mhm.
And so having a deep conversation with my wife about
Mhm.
the calling that I was feeling on my heart,
Mhm.
because it needed to be a joint calling on our hearts. Uh, and that took a little time because
Mhm.
I was the one that visited the campus, or I was the one that had the interview and sort of understood what the needs were at the next institution.
Mhm.
And having that cooperation is another affirmation that okay,
Yeah.
this is what's right. This is a calling that we feel we need to respond to.
Mm. Wow. So waiting on God, seeing if those close to us are in agreement. Give me one more, could you? One more to help us to make choices like this. One more thing that helps you.
I know pausing and waiting on the Lord is an aspect of this next component, and that's prayer.
Hmm.
We need to humbly, reflect on the decisions that are before you, whether they're the daily decisions of life or whether they're big decisions about transitions in life, whether you're going to retire or whether you need to move or should move and take on another job someplace else. So
Mhm.
I think praying about it, making sure you're at peace with that decision.
Yes.
Think about, okay, is this about a gain in money or notoriety or power, or
Mhm.
is this about influencing your friends to show that you're doing something more magnificent? I think all of those things need to be taken into consideration. Is this what is right in God's plan for me, and not necessarily what my brother or my sister or my neighbor might say about it?
Mhm. Yeah, like that. I am so glad you brought that up. Motives are so important. And it just reminds me of, you know, asking yourself which thing would give God the most glory. Will this decision give God the most glory? What you said reminded me of that. Thanks for sharing. So, could you share a few lessons or words of wisdom that have helped you on your leadership journey?
Well, as I glance behind me here on this Zoom screen, I've got a little tractor right here, and I don't know the wheels coming off, but I like this tractor in my office. But on the top of this tractor, I put something, and I don't know if you can read that too close, but there's a letter D on it. So this is my D tractor. And, in leadership, we all have distractions that come our way, right?
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, I used to drive a little John Deere 2030 and a Massey Ferguson, and I had a front end loader on that. And so I did quite a bit of work excavating and doing some work. So this is why I have this little toy in my office. When distractions come your way as a leader, put them in the front end loader and put them in your trash can, and don't dwell a lot of time on the distractions that come your way. That has influenced my life, because a distraction might come your way as a leader and you might spend 3 weeks dealing with it. And, I'm asked to be the president of this university to fulfill its mission and to advance its mission. And if all I'm doing is dealing with the distractions to that mission, I've lost sight of why I'm here. And so that piece of that little toy reminds me that I'm here for the mission of this institution, and not to deal with all of the distractions. And they can be very time consuming. And I've just made the decision in my career that I need to make sure I compartmentalize that, so that those distractions are less than 10% of what I deal with on a weekly basis.
What would be a practical example of that, in terms of, so I think this is good advice you're giving us, but somebody might encounter something tomorrow and do not even identify it as a real distraction. What could be an example of something that somebody could even overlook?
Well, I think anytime, I think of, the pandemic in which we live. And I think there are a variety of opinions on vaccinations. There are a variety of opinions on what mitigating circumstances or policies and procedures you need to have in place, whether you wear a mask or not wear a mask. So there are oftentimes, as a leader, you might get emails or you might get telephone calls that cause you to think about your policies. And do you spend a lot of time responding? And I'm just going to make something up. Let's say I got 20 emails a day regarding why these individuals don't agree with a particular policy. Well, do I spend 20 hours a week responding to these emails, providing the justification? To me, that would be too much, because that distracts me from the mission of providing wonderful Christian education to the young people and the old people that come here to school. So that's just an example that I think we face today. But there are other things that people can bring before you that sometimes is so anecdotal that it doesn't really apply to the entire organization in which you lead. And so you might end up spending hours on something that might only apply to 1 or 2 individuals. You have 400 to 500 people that you're dealing with at your organization. So I think making sure you prioritize distractions and give them the place that they deserve, and really prioritize on fulfilling the vision of your institution or your organization and growing it, or whatever the measures are that you have in place as a leader.
Wow. Excellent words of wisdom. Distraction, focus is so important, right? And thanks for the that practical example there, because that way our eyes could be more open in terms of distraction. And so I know this other question, it might not be easy for you to choose. I know you mentioned your favorite Bible verse earlier. So if you want to share another one, that's fine. But I would also ask you, what is your favorite Proverbs? Proverbs is filled with words of wisdom. Could you choose one and share with us today?
Yeah, Proverbs 16:3 is, I think, a delightful proverb. It's commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. So I really firmly believe that. I think, if, as a Christian leader, we need to commit ourselves to the Lord, because if we firmly believe that our institution is his institution, I think we need to commit to him to be able to lead his institution. And when we do so, he's able to establish our plans. And that gives me great comfort. At times, I might feel like I'm the leader, the sole leader. I've got to come up with these ideas, but I need to, commit to him. I need to be smart about it. I need to read in the literature about what are the greatest, what are the benchmarks of wonderful Christian higher education institution. I need to be a smart person. I need to be knowledgeable about how God has blessed other institutions. So I don't need to be just doing this in isolation, because I think God gives us this wonderful opportunity to learn from other people and other organizations. So I need to be a student always. And then with his assistance and with the assistance of those that work closely with me, is to create plans and get affirmation from the team and be able to move the institution forward.
Wow. Yes, commit to the Lord whatever we do. Thank you for sharing that. So what words of wisdom would you give to someone who is trying to make a wise decision? Perhaps they are trying to decide between more than one alternatives. What do you do when you have a decision to make?
Well, I'll speak at maybe a 30,000 foot level. I believe as a leader that if something comes into your inbox, take care of it today and take care of it quickly and then move on. I've been in a lot of leaders' offices where their inbox is full, and they had things that came in 3 weeks ago and it's buried now, and they forget that it's actually in their inbox. So I think as a leader, it's important to make decisions as quickly as possible. And obviously, there are times you want to spend a little bit more time. You want to get maybe some wisdom from some other leaders on a decision that needs to be made. But having a lot of items in the inbox creates stress in one's life. And, being a leader has its share of stresses. And so that's sort of a rule of thumb that I use, and that this is sort of a 30,000 foot level piece of advice that has worked in my life. Let's deal with it. And when people come in, they say, well, maybe Dr. Shaw, you need to spend a little time thinking about it. And I said, I don't need to spend any time. But let's make a decision and move on. And sometimes that works well. Most of the time it does, but sometimes, you might have to rethink that and change the direction. But for the most part, that has really helped me. So how do you make a decision? I think, based on your experience, you have to think about the issues at hand and whether a decision is going to be best for the institution. Is it in alignment with the mission? Often before decisions are made, you pray. I pray about it and ask God for his wisdom and blessing. But I think as Christian leaders, God grants you experience and wisdom to be able to interpret issues that come before you. And, I think whatever decision you make, I think as a leader, you need to be transparent about that. You need to be able to share with your constituency why you made the decision, and you need to have a good rationale for that decision.
Wow. You mentioned a number of things here. As take care of things today. that could be a bit controversial because some people are like, put away the emails and focus. How do you balance focus with dealing with these things today, right now?
So I think you just compartmentalize. Find an hour to deal with emails and then focus on other things. I'm preparing for a Board of Trustees meeting, which comes up at the end of this month. So to do that, I've got to carve out specific time to think about the discussion items that will strategically move this institution forward. And so I've got like 7 committees of our trustees. And so I'm working with each of our vice presidents, who are the secretaries of those board committees. So, being able to navigate and each of those committees and how that influences our Board of Trustees agenda, and then dealing with the day-to-day operations of the institution, being able to meet with faculty. There's, being a leader it's not all that easy. There's some complexities, but I think you use the word balance, and I think we just need to have that balance in our lives, not only at work, being able to balance the day-to-day things versus the strategic things. As the leader, I need to be spending at least 50% of my time thinking strategically about Southern Adventist University and where we are 5 years from now. But I can't negate what a faculty member sends me in an email, or a parent that called me last night concerned about a student's assignment. So you have to do the day-to-day things and have integrity and be able to respond, but you also have to give yourself sufficient time to set the proper vision and the strategies on how you're going to fulfill that vision, for the next year or two.
I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if you can answer it, and you don't have to get into much detail, but when you're thinking strategically, do you help us understand, is it that you might be there quietly and God just gives you a vision, or how do you think strategically? What strategies do you use to think strategically?
Yeah, that's I'm not sure that I can write a book on this or even write a chapter. I've thought a lot strategically over the last number of years in higher education. I was at a campus at Florida State University where we were going through a hard time in 2008, and the president of the university threatened to shut down our campus. And I was blessed to be the president of the National Association of Branch Campus Administrators at that time, and we were holding our annual conference at the same time that this news release came out in the newspaper, front page news, at our branch campus. And so I was hosting all of these people from around the country. They were coming in almost in tears saying, "Oh, Ken, I'm so sorry to hear that your campus may be closing." But what we did is the community pushed back, just a quick story, and the president backed off of that. But he asked me, as the leader of the institution, he says, "Ken, I'm going to cut your budget by 25%, but I want you to grow it by 40%. And you need to do that in 4 years." And so we were at 980 students. And so we had to think, we were forced to think strategically. Doing what we did yesterday wouldn't get us to 1,400 students. So I got everyone in the room and we locked the door, and talked about what is it that we can do as a team to move the needle in terms of enrollment on this campus. And we set out a 4-year vision, and with very specific action items for every person in the room, and they would have monthly accountability to the entire group. And we did that for 4 years, and we were over 1,400 students by the time that 4 years was done. And that had to do with strategic planning. Likewise, when I went to my next institution, that's really my roadmap as a leader. I need to know the strategic plan. I need to know that we're all part of that. So how that comes about, I think now for me, it comes with a lot of experience in higher education and what I know that works. But I think it's not just what works. I think it's moving the envelope and seeing how God can bless. Because I think, he says he can do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. So we shouldn't just be asking him. We should be believing that he can go well above what we ask him to do. So I think having a strategic plan that is aspirational is extremely important. So I know you told me not to get into a lot of details, but I've shared a lot of details on that. So
that's perfect. That's perfect. That's amazing. And I'm glad I asked the question because you gave a rich answer for us that we could learn from. You mentioned the envelope, money. I know that's a big thing with leaders, funding and so on. Could you share with us a time when funding was important for you as a leader and how things worked out?
Being in higher education, and it may not be for everyone that watches this, but philanthropy is very important for higher education institution. And typically leaders of those institutions, a large portion of their time is talking with business leaders and alumni and asking them to give back to the institution. And I had opportunity at an institution to go to a foundation, and I asked for $2 million, a matching grant. And they wrote back and said, well, we can't give you 2, but we can give you 1, but you need to make sure that you have $8 million in the bank within 12 months or we'll retract the offer. And I just felt God is really blessed. And at that point, we had about 3 million in the bank. And so I had 12 months to get to $8 million. And it was 3 weeks until the year was up. And I had been talking to lots of donors. And I asked our advancement people, okay, how much do we have in the pot? And they said we have $3.8 million. And I'm thinking, okay, the math tells me I need 4.2. I need more than double that to get to $8 million, and I have 3 weeks. And so I walked into an assembly, and this is a Christian institution. I walked into an assembly, and I pulled out my keys, and I held them up in front of all of the students were at assembly. I says, what is this? And they said, those are keys, Dr. Shaw. I said, no, the key is the prayer. Prayer is the key in the hand of faith that unlocks heaven's storehouse, where are treasured the boundless resources of omnipotence. And I shared that with them, and I says, I want each of us to pray. And we broke up into pairs, and we prayed that God would open up his storehouse, and somehow in the next 3 weeks, we would get $4.2 million. I didn't know how God was going to do it, but I put my effort into those 11 months and 1 week. I did everything I could and wasn't anywhere close to 8 million. But I can tell you just really quick, Firm Faith, I had phone calls that said, I'm ready to give you a gift. This is right after the assembly. So I went up and they gave me $250,000. I called someone out of town. And I thought, well, if God's going to do this, he's going to use me and use our other advancement folks. So I called someone out of town and I said, I'd love to come visit with you. And I says, I've got my calendar open. When is a day free? And I'll be happy to fly. And they said, well, we basically don't make appointments. If you're in town, just come by to see me. So I flew on faith, hoping that they would be there. And I called them and they let me in their home. And I walked out with $1 million check. So, and, in philanthropy, that's a miracle. You usually take 6 to 8 times with a major donor to be able to get a gift. And I got calls. Can you come up and pick up a check? It's $50,000. Anyway, and then there was a $2 million gift and then another $500,000 gift, just on and on. The miracles happened until we were on the next to the last day when we had to have 8 million. We still were short. But when we finished up on that last day, I just felt, God's abundant blessing because we had 8,035,000. I may not remember the number. I think it was $8,035,390. So we had made our $8 million goal and got the $1 million match from the foundation. That's just an example. And what I've done since then is, before I call on anyone, because God has blessed individuals with good business practices and has given them the gift of having money, and they're good stewards. I'm praying that they are good stewards. I pray that God will touch their hearts, that they will be open and inclined to provide back to the Christian institution in which I'm working. And God has really blessed in that way.
Wow, amazing, amazing. I could say it again. But what I gathered from what stood out is that you prayed, you believed, but also you said a very important thing, that God was going to work through you. You could have sat there, and you actually had to step out in faith, and God worked. Amazing. I'm sure that experience really strengthened your faith, help you to have firm faith for future things, right? So just one quick thing I wanted to ask you about something that you said earlier, because I think this is important, about making quick decisions, because sometimes we want to sit on things because we want to make sure that we're in the center of God's will and we don't move, right? But you have been making quick decisions. I know you didn't mention it when I asked you, what are some things that you think help to get you promoted? But I wondered if your decision-making ability is one of the things that has helped you. And in terms of making quick decision, is that something that has been a trend in your experience?
I'm not sure when I first started what my decision-making processes were. I think I did deliberate a lot more, but as I've, in my career, as more responsibilities have befallen me, I think it's important that we try to act as quickly as possible on the actions that are before us. And if we pray that God will lead and direct and provide wisdom, then I think, as you just mentioned, we need to step out and utilize that gift that God has given us. I think it opens up things, and I would, and there are different styles of leadership. I certainly understand that. I, as a leader, would not want to have 30 things in my inbox. It would be hard for me to go home at night and to be able to have a balance beyond work. And I think that's extremely important too. My relationship with God is a balance beyond work, certainly influences my work. A balance with my family is important as well. So I think as leaders, we can spend 60 to 80 hours at work. I could spend that here, never getting everything done, but you have to turn off the work clock and go, have a healthy relationship, with your spouse and with your family and with your God. You have to navigate that. And some days it's a little more of a challenge based on the responsibilities that you have for that day.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So Dr. Shaw, it seems as if things have really been going well for you. God has worked things out for you. Let's say a leader is listening to this conversation and they're like, oh, I guess he didn't have any challenges. I think things have just been, I know you mentioned the amazing story with the grant and so on, and that turned out. But what would you say to someone who is experiencing a challenging time? And I know this is a blanket question, but when challenging times come, what's your go-to? How do you deal with challenging times? We're living in unusual times now, and leaders are going through a lot.
My wife teases me sometimes. She says, you look at challenges as opportunities. So I would rather not think of a challenge as something that's going to distract me from my job. We talked about distractions earlier, but that doesn't mean that issues don't come before me as a leader. The personnel, there's always when you have a large organization, there will be personnel issues that you need to confront and face, but, compartmentalize those so it doesn't take an emotional part of your life that you have to take home with you, or that you impact other decisions. You might have to give it a certain period of time to deal with that, let's say, personnel issue, and give it reasonable time. My philosophy is that every individual is, they're a gift from God. God has given them the gift of everlasting life. And if, I need to look at people as if they will be my neighbor in heaven. And if you start looking at people that way, even though, let's say, I've had to let people go from organizations in which I've worked, but I do that because they don't stand up for the mission of the institution in which I'm serving. So it's a very easy decision on my part, even though it may be difficult for that particular person, because I want that person to be happy. And if they're not happy at the institution in which I'm serving along with them, they need to go someplace else where God can bless them and they can fulfill whatever that mission is in their life. So every personnel issue is different. And so that could be another discussion on how you deal with personnel issues. But I think being able to compartmentalize, I think, would be the nugget, if that is such, that I could provide. Compartmentalize that so that you deal with it and you do it effectively as a Christian, but you deal with it and you don't let it just resolve and fester and impact the rest of your life.
Wow. I like what you said, seeing the challenge as an opportunity. Sometimes I say, wow, I am just looking forward to see how God is going to work this out. It's like, I'm curious with this challenge. Let me see how God is going to work it out. It's almost like interesting for me. So I'm glad you saw it as that, and just the ability to make tough decisions. And I like how you were able to reframe even the decision to let someone go. You're like, oh, this is benefiting the person, right? So I like that. The final question I have for you is, could you leave our audience with a call to action, an encouragement, or a word of wisdom, just to close off this interview?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. And thank you. This has been a delightful interview.
Yeah.
Even in verbalizing things helps to either affirm or helps me to be more conscious of being a Christian leader. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think as a leader, for me, it's important to really be mission focused. Why am I, as a leader, why have I been tasked to be the leader of this institution? And if it's inspiring lives for eternity, and that's in essence the mission of our institution, and I really embrace that strongly, then I needed to do everything in my core to ensure that that mission is carried out, and that it's carried out even more effectively in the years to come. So whatever organization you're in, make sure you embrace whatever that mission is and embody that with the people that you have the privilege to work with, and do it with all due diligence and with all the passion and the energy God has given you. I just find it absolutely a pleasure and a privilege to be able to serve as president. I'm awestruck that they asked me to serve here. This is my alma mater, and it's thrilling. I get up early thinking about what I can do to advance the mission and to carry the institution further. And I think when that passion starts to wane, we need to think about something else to do and do something different. So, Firm Faith, thank you for this opportunity, and blessings to you and all of those that you connect with as well.
Thank you very much, President Kenneth Shaw. You have shared with us some practical words of wisdom today, and it was really a great experience for me to listen to your amazing story. How often do you become a student at an institution and then be called back to serve as the president? That's God right there. So we thank you for sharing your amazing story. And I certainly learned a lot from you, and I know that our viewers will too. So thank you again for sharing.
It's been my pleasure.
And for those of you who are listening, we thank you for taking the time to listen to this conversation, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.